September 9th, 2025. Israeli fighter jets scream across the Persian Gulf. Their target not in Gaza, not in Lebanon, but in Doha, Qatar, the heart of a wealthy Gulf state that happens to be a major non-NATO ally of the United States. Missiles strike. Hamas leaders are the targets. But here's what sent shockwaves through every palace in the Middle East. This wasn't just another strike in the ongoing conflict. This was the first time Israel had ever attacked a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council. A line had been crossed that nobody thought would ever be crossed. And where was America? Silent. Conspicuously, devastatingly silent. 8 days later, in the gilded halls of Al Yamama Palace in Riyadh, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman did something that would reshape the entire security architecture of the Middle East. He signed a defense pact with Pakistan, a nuclear power, that essentially said if you attack one of us, you attack both of us. And just like that, the rules of the game changed forever. The question that should be keeping strategists in Washington awake at night is simple. What happens when America's most important Arab ally decides it needs new friends? For 70 years, Saudi Arabia's security has been guaranteed by one superpower, the United States. American military might has been the invisible shield protecting the kingdom's oil fields, its cities, its royal family. The relationship was simple and it worked. Saudi Arabia provided stable oil supplies and regional influence. America provided military protection and advanced weapons. Generation after generation of Saudi kings slept soundly, knowing that the full weight of American military power stood between them and their enemies. But that shield has been cracking, and Mohammed bin Salman, the young crown prince everyone calls MBS, has been watching those cracks spread with growing alarm. What happened in Doha wasn't just an attack on Qatar. It was a message to every Gulf state. Your American allies won't always be there when you need them. The treaties you've signed, the bases you've hosted, the weapons you've bought, none of it guarantees your security anymore. And MBS heard that message loud and clear. The answer to what happens next is unfolding right now, and it involves Pakistan's nuclear weapons, Turkey's military ambitions, a complete recalibration of power in the most volatile region on Earth, and the potential end of American dominance in the Middle East. This isn't just about one defense pact. This is about the fundamental restructuring of global power, about what happens when client states become independent actors, about the consequences of broken promises and failed commitments. This is about the birth of a new world order, and it's happening faster than anyone expected. Let's rewind for a moment because this story doesn't start in 2025. It starts with broken promises and unanswered attacks that have been piling up for years, each one adding another crack to the foundation of the US-Saudi relationship. September 14th, 2019. The sun rises over Abqaiq in Saudi Arabia's eastern province, home to the world's largest oil processing facility. This isn't just any industrial complex. Saudi Aramco's installations at Abqaiq can process 5.7 million barrels of crude oil per day. The facility is so critical to global energy markets that it's been called the most important piece of oil infrastructure on the planet. That morning, as workers arrived for their shifts, 18 drones and 3 cruise missiles, launched by Iran or its Houthi proxies in Yemen, slammed into these facilities with devastating precision. The attacks were surgical, hitting exactly the right targets to cause maximum disruption. Smoke billowed into the sky, visible from space. Global oil prices spiked by nearly 20% in a single day. Half of Saudi Arabia's oil production, 5% of the entire world's daily oil supply, went offline in an instant. This wasn't a minor border skirmish or a terrorist attack by some ragtag militia. This was a sophisticated military operation using advanced weapons against critical infrastructure that keeps the global economy running. The precision of the strikes suggested state-level capabilities. The message was clear: Iran could hit Saudi Arabia's most valuable assets whenever it wanted, and there was nothing the kingdom could do to stop it. Saudi Arabia looked to Washington, expecting the full weight of American military response. After all, isn't this exactly why they've been buying hundreds of billions of dollars in American weapons for decades? Isn't this why American troops are stationed in the region? Isn't this the whole point of the security relationship? The kingdom had just absorbed an act of war, and surely America would respond with overwhelming force. To demonstrate that attacking a key ally had consequences, President Trump tweeted. He condemned the attack in strong language. He said America was locked and loaded and ready to respond. Saudi officials watched those tweets, believing that American B-52 bombers would soon be heading toward Iranian targets, that cruise missiles would be destroying Iranian air defense systems, that the full might of American military power was about to demonstrate why you don't attack U.S. allies. And then nothing happened. No retaliation, no military response, not even a token strike against secondary targets. Nothing. The Saudis were left to absorb one of the most significant attacks on energy infrastructure in modern history, with little more than diplomatic statements from their supposed protector. Trump eventually explained that he didn't want to escalate into a full war with Iran. He suggested that the Saudis should handle their own defense. The message to Riyadh was devastating. When it really matters, when your most critical infrastructure is burning, you're on your own. That moment crystallized something that had been building for years across 3 consecutive American administrations. The reliability of American security commitments was no longer something Saudi Arabia could take for granted. Under President Obama, the kingdom watched in horror as Washington pivoted toward Iran, negotiating the nuclear deal that Riyadh saw as legitimizing and empowering their greatest regional rival. The Saudis viewed Iran as an expansionist theocracy determined to dominate the Middle East, spreading its revolutionary ideology and backing militant proxies in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. And here was America, their supposed ally, cutting deals with Tehran, releasing billions in frozen assets, treating the Iranian regime as a legitimate negotiating partner rather than the threat Riyadh knew it to be. The message seemed to be that America cared more about its own priorities, about nuclear nonproliferation and diplomatic achievements, than about the security concerns of its Arab allies. Then came President Trump, who at least talked tough about Iran. He withdrew from the nuclear deal, which the Saudis applauded. He imposed severe sanctions on Tehran. He ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general who had orchestrated proxy operations across the Middle East. For a while, it seemed like the old alliance was back on track. But when it came to actually defending Saudi Arabia from direct attack, when those missiles hit Abqaiq, Trump blinked. The tough talk evaporated. The man who presented himself as the strongest American president in decades, who promised to restore American power and credibility, chose not to defend a key ally under direct attack. The Saudis learned that American military commitments under Trump were negotiable, transactional, dependent on the president's mood and his assessment of domestic political costs. And then came President Biden, and the relationship deteriorated further. Biden campaigned promising to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Khashoggi, a Saudi dissident and Washington Post columnist, was killed and dismembered by Saudi agents in what U.S. intelligence assessed was an operation approved at the highest levels of the Saudi government. Biden released intelligence reports directly implicating Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He initially refused to deal directly with MBS, downgrading the relationship and treating the Crown Prince like a criminal rather than the de facto ruler of a key ally. The personal insults stung. More importantly, it signaled that American support for Saudi Arabia was conditional, subject to changing political winds in Washington, dependent on whoever happened to occupy the White House. For Mohammed bin Salman, this was unacceptable. He's not some elderly monarch content to manage decline. He's a young, ambitious leader who has bet everything on transforming Saudi Arabia into a modern, diversified, globally influential power. He's pushing through Vision 2030, an incredibly ambitious program to remake the Saudi economy and society. He's building Neom, a $500 billion futuristic city on the Red Sea coast that's supposed to showcase Saudi innovation. He's opening up Saudi society, allowing women to drive and work, bringing entertainment and tourism to a country that was closed to both. He's attracting global investment, hosting international sporting events, positioning Saudi Arabia as a bridge between East and West. He's ruthlessly consolidated power, sidelining rivals within the royal family, crushing dissent, centralizing decision-making in his own hands. Everything he's building depends on one fundamental requirement: security. None of his grand plans matter if he can't guarantee the basic safety of his country, and increasingly, he doesn't believe America will be there when the missiles fly. This is where the psychology matters. Mohammed bin Salman is not a leader who accepts dependence. He sees dependence as weakness, and weakness as unacceptable for a great power, which is what he believes Saudi Arabia should be. He's watched 3 American presidents prove unreliable. He's seen American commitment to the Middle East steadily declining regardless of which party controls Washington. He understands that America's strategic priorities have shifted. Washington cares more about China now than about the Middle East. American energy independence means that Middle Eastern oil matters less than it used to. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan exhausted American appetite for military engagement in the region. Nobody in Washington wants another Middle Eastern entanglement. All of this is rational from an American perspective. But it's terrifying if you're a Gulf monarch whose security depends on American commitment. So when those Israeli jets struck Doha on September 9th, 2025, it wasn't just shocking because of what happened. It was shocking because of what didn't happen. Qatar is a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the regional bloc that's supposed to provide collective security for Gulf monarchies. Qatar hosts Al Udeid Air Base, one of the largest and most important American military installations anywhere in the world. 10,000 American military personnel operate from Qatari soil. United States Central Command Forward Headquarters is located there. American combat aircraft, drones, logistics operations, all run through Al Udeid. It's absolutely critical to American military operations across the Middle East, Southwest Asia, and even into Africa. And yet, Israel conducted an airstrike on the Qatari capital with apparent impunity. Let that sink in for a moment. A country that hosts massive American military infrastructure, a country that's been designated a major non-NATO ally, a country that has security agreements with the United States, was attacked by another country that receives billions in American military aid. And America did nothing, didn't protest, didn't threaten consequences, didn't even issue a strongly worded statement. The message to every Gulf leader was unmistakable. Your alliance with America doesn't actually protect you from anything. Your hosting of American bases, your billions spent on American weapons, your cooperation with American regional strategy, none of it guarantees your sovereignty or your security. You are fundamentally on your own. When push comes to shove, America will prioritize its relationship with Israel over its commitments to you every single time, without exception. The Arab and Islamic world convened an emergency summit to address what had happened in Doha. Leaders from dozens of countries gathered to discuss how to respond to this unprecedented violation. The rhetoric was heated. Everyone understood that a dangerous precedent had been set. If Israel could strike Qatar with impunity, it could strike anywhere in the Gulf. No capital was safe. No sovereignty was secure. The old rules, the old understandings, the old red lines, all of them had been erased. 2 days after that summit, on September 17, 2025, Mohammed bin Salman made his move. The ceremony at Al Yamama Palace in Riyadh was broadcast across the Arab world. Present were the Crown Prince himself, senior Saudi military officials, and a Pakistani delegation led by their top defense leadership. The two countries signed what they formally called the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement. The language was clear, explicit, and unprecedented in its scope and commitment. Any act of aggression against either country would be treated as an act of aggression against both. This wasn't a cooperation agreement where both sides promised to consult if problems arise. This wasn't a framework for possible future collaboration. This wasn't diplomatic language carefully crafted to sound meaningful while committing to nothing. This was a mutual defense pact, the kind of ironclad commitment that has started world wars and reshaped continents throughout history. This was Saudi Arabia and Pakistan saying that their security was now interlinked, that an attack on one required a response from both, that they were bound together in a formal military alliance. And here's what makes it truly significant, what makes it genuinely game-changing. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Pakistan's nuclear arsenal includes somewhere between 70 and 90 nuclear warheads, according to most estimates, though the exact number is classified. These aren't theoretical weapons. Pakistan has demonstrated nuclear capability, conducted multiple nuclear tests, developed sophisticated delivery systems, including ballistic missiles and potentially cruise missiles and aircraft-delivered weapons. Pakistan has a nuclear doctrine, command structures, security protocols, the entire infrastructure of a nuclear weapons state. And Pakistan is the only Muslim-majority nation in the world with an operational nuclear arsenal. Every other nuclear power is either Western, Russia, China, India, or Israel. The Islamic world has looked to Pakistan's nuclear weapons as a source of pride, as proof that Muslim nations could achieve technological sophistication and military capability that matches or exceeds the West. There have long been rumors and speculation about whether Pakistan's nuclear arsenal serves as an informal nuclear umbrella for Saudi Arabia, whether Pakistani weapons might be available to defend the kingdom in extremis. Now that speculation has become something much more concrete. Think about what this means in practical terms. If Iran attacks Saudi Arabia with ballistic missiles, or sends proxy forces across the border, or conducts another strike like the one on Abqaiq, Pakistan is now treaty-bound to come to the kingdom's defense, not might, not could, is bound by formal treaty obligation. If the Houthis in Yemen, backed and supplied by Tehran, launch more missile attacks at Riyadh or Jeddah or target critical Saudi infrastructure, Pakistan's military could be drawn directly into the conflict. Saudi Arabia has just acquired what it's been seeking for decades, a nuclear umbrella. Not from America, not from any Western power, but from an Islamic nation with deep historical ties, religious connections, and shared strategic interests. This is the security guarantee that Washington wouldn't provide. This is the ironclad commitment that 3 American presidents failed to deliver. And Mohammed bin Salman got it from Islamabad instead. The relationship between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan runs deep, far deeper than most outsiders realize. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have been close for generations, bound together by religious ties, strategic interests, and mutual need. Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam, the custodian of the 2 holy mosques in Mecca and Medina, the spiritual center of the Islamic world. Pakistan was created as a Muslim homeland, a nation explicitly founded on Islamic identity. The religious connection creates natural affinity, but it goes far beyond religion. Pakistani military officers have served in Saudi Arabia for decades as advisors, trainers, and potentially as defenders of the kingdom. There are credible reports that Pakistan stationed troops in Saudi Arabia during previous crises, ready to defend the kingdom if needed. Hundreds of thousands of Pakistani workers live in Saudi Arabia, sending remittances home that are critical to Pakistan's economy. The kingdom has bailed out Pakistan's perpetually struggling economy multiple times with multi-billion-dollar loans. Oil supplied on credit, deposits in Pakistan's central bank to shore up foreign exchange reserves. When Pakistan faces financial crisis, which happens regularly, Saudi Arabia is often the first country to provide emergency support. When Pakistan needs diplomatic backing in international forums, Saudi Arabia provides it. When Pakistan seeks investment or trade opportunities, Saudi Arabia opens doors. The relationship is deep, multifaceted, and genuinely strategic for both sides. But this agreement formalizes everything. This takes what was an informal, ambiguous, deniable relationship and turns it into a formal military alliance with explicit commitments enshrined in treaty language. This creates obligations that both sides will be expected to honor. This is Saudi Arabia saying that Pakistan isn't just a friend or a partner, but an ally in the fullest sense of the word, bound by the same kind of mutual defense commitment that defines alliances like NATO. Analysts and commentators immediately started calling this a potential Muslim NATO. And while that description might be somewhat hyperbolic, it captures something real about what's being attempted here. This is collective defense architecture being built outside Western frameworks, outside American leadership, outside the alliance structures that have defined global security since World War II. It's Saudi Arabia saying we will secure ourselves with partners who share our civilizational outlook, our religious identity, our threat perceptions, our regional concerns. We will build our own alliance system that doesn't depend on Washington's approval or protection. And America wasn't invited to the table. America wasn't consulted. America learned about this, like everyone else, from news reports and official announcements after the fact. But Saudi Arabia and Pakistan weren't done. Almost immediately after the September agreement was signed, reports started emerging that they were in discussions with Turkey about joining this arrangement and expanding the bilateral pact into something trilateral. Turkey, the nation that bridges Europe and Asia, that controls the straits connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, that has the second largest military in NATO, but increasingly acts like it's ready to leave the Western alliance behind. Turkey, under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has been drifting away from NATO and the West for years. The trajectory has been clear and consistent. Erdogan has purchased Russian S-400 missile defense systems, despite vociferous American objections and threats of sanctions. The S-400 purchase was a direct challenge to NATO, since the system is incompatible with NATO air defense networks and potentially compromises F-35 stealth technology. The United States kicked Turkey out of the F-35 program because of it. But Erdogan didn't back down. He's cultivated increasingly close ties with Moscow, coordinating with Russia and Syria, cooperating on energy projects like the Turk Stream gas pipeline, holding regular summits with Vladimir Putin. He's built relationships with Iran despite being on opposite sides of various regional conflicts. He's positioned himself as a leader of the Islamic world, willing to confront Western powers over issues like Palestine, willing to criticize European countries over their treatment of Muslim minorities, willing to assert Turkish interests regardless of what NATO allies think. He's been systematically building Turkey's domestic defense industry, investing billions in developing indigenous weapon systems, drones, missiles, armored vehicles, even working toward Turkish fighter aircraft and aircraft carriers. The goal is clear: reduce dependence on Western weapons and technology, achieve strategic autonomy, make Turkey a genuinely independent regional power that doesn't need permission from Washington or Brussels to pursue its interests. Turkish military capabilities have grown dramatically. Turkish drones, particularly the Bayraktar TB2, have proven devastatingly effective in multiple conflicts. In Libya, Turkish drones helped turn the tide of the civil war. In Syria, they've struck regime and Russian targets. In Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan used Turkish drones to overwhelming effect against Armenian forces, essentially winning the war through drone warfare. These aren't cheap knockoffs of Western technology. These are sophisticated, combat-proven systems that are now being exported to countries around the world. Turkey is becoming a major arms exporter, which gives it influence and leverage. Countries that buy Turkish weapon systems become dependent on Turkish spare parts, training, and support. They become informally aligned with Turkish interests. Turkey is building its own sphere of influence through military technical cooperation. In January 2026, Bloomberg reported that Turkey was in advanced talks to join the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact. Multiple sources confirmed that negotiations were ongoing and that a deal was very likely. The implications were staggering to contemplate. If Turkey joined, this wouldn't just be a bilateral arrangement between two countries trying to improve their security cooperation. This would be a triangular alliance spanning the Middle East, South Asia, and the edge of Europe. It would include two of the largest militaries in the Muslim world, plus a nuclear power. It would control vast energy resources, critical shipping lanes through the Bosphorus and Hormuz, and represent massive populations. Combined, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey represent nearly 400 million people. Their combined GDP runs into the trillions of dollars. Their combined military capabilities would be formidable by any standard. Think about what each brings to the table. Turkey brings the second largest military in NATO, with over 350,000 active duty personnel. It brings advanced drone technology that's changing modern warfare. It brings control of the Turkish Straits, one of the most strategically important waterways in the world. It brings a defense industry that can produce sophisticated weapons domestically. It brings experience operating in multiple theaters, from Syria to Libya to the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey is a serious military power with real capabilities and a willingness to use them. Pakistan brings nuclear capability and one of the largest standing armies in the world, with over 600,000 active duty personnel. Pakistani forces have extensive experience fighting insurgencies and conducting counterterrorism operations. Pakistan's Inter Services Intelligence Agency is one of the most capable intelligence services in the region, with deep networks and operational experience. Pakistan brings geographic position connecting South Asia to the Middle East. It brings relationships across the Islamic world built over decades. And most importantly, it brings those nuclear weapons and the implicit deterrent they provide. Saudi Arabia brings wealth, enormous wealth that can fund military operations, purchase weapon systems, invest in infrastructure, and sustain alliances over the long term. Saudi defense spending exceeds $60 billion annually, making it one of the largest military spenders in the world. The kingdom brings geographic position controlling vast stretches of the Persian Gulf coastline and the Red Sea. It brings increasingly sophisticated air defense systems, modern fighter aircraft, ballistic missile capabilities. Saudi Arabia has been investing heavily in military modernization for years. And crucially, Saudi Arabia brings legitimacy as the custodian of Islam's holiest sites, which gives it unique influence across the Muslim world. When Saudi Arabia speaks, the entire Islamic world listens. When Saudi Arabia forms an alliance, it carries weight and significance beyond mere military calculations. Together, these three countries would represent a formidable bloc, a genuine pole of power in a multipolar world. They would have the military muscle, the economic resources, the geographic reach, and the political influence to genuinely shape regional dynamics without needing approval or support from Washington. This would be a coalition that could act independently, pursue its own interests, project power across a huge swath of the globe from North Africa to South Asia. The term Muslim NATO started to sound less like hyperbole and more like actual description of what was emerging. But then something interesting and revealing happened. On January 31st, 2026, just as everyone assumed Turkey's inclusion in the Pact was a done deal, just as analysts were writing pieces about the implications of a trilateral alliance, sources close to the Saudi military told AFP news agency that Turkey would not be joining the Pact. The statement was categorical. It's bilateral, and it will remain bilateral. No ambiguity, no suggestion that Turkey might join later, just a flat denial that expansion was happening. What changed? What happened between the Bloomberg reports of advanced negotiations and the Saudi denial? Was this cold feet in Riyadh about expanding too quickly and taking on obligations that might prove impossible to fulfill? Was it Turkish demands during negotiations that proved unacceptable to the Saudis or Pakistanis? Was it American pressure behind the scenes, with Washington making clear that Turkey joining this pact would have serious consequences for the U.S.-Turkey relationship, despite all its existing problems? Was it concerns from other regional players like the UAE or Egypt who might have worried about being left out of a powerful new bloc? Or was it simply that the public leak of the negotiations forced everyone to pump the brakes, to slow down a process that was moving too fast and attracting too much attention? In international relations, sometimes secrecy is essential precisely because public scrutiny creates pressures and complications that make agreements impossible. Once negotiations became public, domestic constituencies in all three countries started weighing in, each with their own concerns and demands. Regional rivals started maneuvering to prevent the alliance or to extract concessions in exchange for not opposing it. Great powers like the United States, China, and Russia started calculating how this new bloc would affect their interests and what they should do about it. The glare of publicity can kill delicate diplomatic processes. We don't know for certain what happened. Pakistan's defense production minister stated in late January that a draft trilateral agreement was in the pipeline after nearly a year of talks, suggesting that negotiations were real and substantive. But the Saudi denial was equally categorical. For now, at least publicly, it's just Saudi Arabia and Pakistan in the formal alliance. Turkey remains outside. But the fact that these conversations happened at all, that they reached advanced stages, that Bloomberg's sources believed a deal was very likely, tells you everything you need to know about the direction of travel. Saudi Arabia is actively shopping for security partners. It's willing to consider options that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. It's building relationships and exploring arrangements that don't include America at their center. The old Middle Eastern order where Washington was the indispensable power is breaking down, and something new is emerging to replace it. Now here's where the story gets really complicated, because Saudi Arabia hasn't actually abandoned the United States. Not yet anyway, and perhaps not ever completely. In November 2025, just 2 months after signing the Pakistan Pact, President Trump announced that he and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had signed their own strategic defense agreement. Trump, always the salesman, always focused on the economic aspects of every relationship, touted it as a massive win for American interests. The deal included the sale of F-35 Lightning II fighters to Saudi Arabia, some of the most advanced combat aircraft in the world, and a weapon system that America only sells to its closest allies. The F-35 sale was huge symbolically. It meant Saudi Arabia would operate the same stealth fighters as the United States, Israel, and other key American partners. It meant deep military technical cooperation for decades, since F-35s require constant American support, spare parts, software updates, training. Once you buy F-35s, you're locked into a long-term relationship with the United States, whether you want to be or not. Saudi Arabia was also designated a major non-NATO ally, a status that comes with various military and economic benefits. Major non-NATO ally status facilitates arms sales, enables participation in certain defense projects, provides access to military technology and training that non-allies don't get. It's a significant designation that only a select group of countries receive. Trump made it sound like the old alliance was stronger than ever, like the relationship had been restored to its proper footing after the Biden years. American media mostly covered it as another Trump foreign policy success, another arms deal that would create American jobs. But if you read the fine print, if you look at what the Strategic Defense Agreement actually contains versus what it doesn't contain, you'll see something crucial missing: an explicit security guarantee. The Trump administration's agreement with Saudi Arabia didn't include the kind of ironclad commitment to defend the kingdom that Qatar received in a Trump executive order. It didn't include the treaty obligations that bind America to NATO members under Article 5, where an attack on one is considered an attack on all. It didn't include the mutual defense treaties that obligate the United States to defend countries like Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia. Those treaties use explicit language about collective defense and shared security. They create legal obligations that presidents can't simply ignore. The Trump-Saudi agreement wasn't that. It was primarily a defense sales agreement and a political designation. It was America agreeing to sell advanced weapons and to give Saudi Arabia a prestigious title. But it wasn't America committing to actually defend Saudi Arabia if the kingdom came under attack. And that matters enormously, because Mohammed bin Salman isn't stupid. He can read treaty language as well as anyone. He knows the difference between a real security guarantee and a symbolic gesture. The Trump agreement gives Saudi Arabia access to advanced American technology, which is valuable. It keeps channels of communication and cooperation open between Washington and Riyadh, which is important. But it doesn't give Saudi Arabia what MBS really wants: an unambiguous commitment that America will defend the kingdom with military force if necessary. That's what the Pakistan Pact provides. That's what makes it strategically significant, despite all the questions about implementation and practical capabilities. Pakistan is committed clearly and publicly to treating an attack on Saudi Arabia as an attack on Pakistan itself. America has not made that commitment, and Saudi Arabia notices the difference. What we're watching is Mohammed bin Salman executing a sophisticated hedging strategy. He's not burning bridges with Washington, because that would be foolish. America is still the world's dominant military power. American weapons are still the best in many categories. The American market is still crucial for Saudi oil exports and for attracting investment to Vision 2030 projects. The United States Navy still protects shipping lanes that Saudi commerce depends on. Completely alienating Washington would be strategic suicide. But MBS isn't putting all his eggs in the American basket anymore either. He's diversifying. He's building multiple security relationships so that Saudi Arabia isn't dependent on any single power. He's doing with security what he's trying to do with the Saudi economy: reduce dangerous dependencies and create multiple options so that no one can hold you hostage. The F-35 deal keeps America engaged and invested in Saudi success. After all, if Saudi F-35s get shot down or prove ineffective, that reflects poorly on American technology and hurts American arms sales worldwide. So America has an interest in ensuring Saudi military success even without a formal defense treaty. The Pakistan Pact provides the security guarantee that America won't give. It creates an alternative pole of support that Saudi Arabia can rely on when American support proves insufficient. Potential future arrangements with Turkey or other partners would add yet another layer of capability and another option when making strategic decisions. It's sophisticated hedging at a grand strategic level, exactly what you'd expect from an ambitious leader, trying to navigate an increasingly complex and dangerous region while protecting his country's interests and his own position. But here's what should genuinely concern American policymakers if they're paying attention. Hedging can become abandonment. Relationships drift, alliances hollow out gradually and then suddenly. Every time Saudi Arabia deepens its security ties with Pakistan, every time it explores partnerships with Turkey, Every time it builds military cooperation with China or Russia or anyone else, the kingdom becomes a little less dependent on American protection. And once that dependency is gone, so is American leverage. Why should Saudi Arabia listen to American demands or requests if Saudi security doesn't depend on American commitment? Why should MBS moderate his policies to please Washington if Washington isn't actually guaranteeing his survival? The entire basis of American influence in the Gulf has been the implicit bargain. We protect you, you accommodate our interests. If the protection becomes unreliable or disappears, the accommodation disappears too.